Hello all, just make sure that's working. Welcome to this week's live stream. Hello all, just make sure that's working. I'm just doing it on my phone, make sure it's working, obviously is. Lots to go through today, interesting with what we've seen this week. This reasonably big sell-off in US markets. This is the S&P, and it's the biggest sell-off we've been through since April of this year. Interesting levels down here, I think. We'll talk about that a little bit. What else has been interesting? Gold. I mean, big sell-off, relatively speaking, in gold. You know, we saw gold hit all-time highs a week last Wednesday and drop more than $100 this week over the last week and a half. So I think that's interesting. Oil. I think there was a nice little short signal on oil late yesterday, perhaps earlier this morning. So quite a bit to go through. So as usual, if you're new to this, welcome to it. I do this normally every Friday at 2:30 UK time, so just as US markets are getting underway. And what we do, we'll have a look at the major announcements for next week, busy week next week, and then we'll jump on, look at some of the major markets, indices, FX, other stuff. Bitcoin, oil, natural gas, gold, silver, all of those. And then if there's any stuff that you want looking at, if you just put it in the chat, and then we'll take a look at it. Can I just make sure, is everything actually working? Because I'm not quite sure if it's working on my screen. Can someone just type in and say if it's okay at your end? Because I'm just worried it looks like it might have frozen on my screen. Oh no, it's just come back to life. So I'm assuming it's okay. Okay, let's get into it. Let's just do a risk warning first. This presentation is only for educational purposes. It does not contain and should not be construed as containing investment advice or an investment recommendation or an offer of or solicitation for a transaction in any financial instrument. David Jones accepts no responsibility for any use that may be made of these comments and for any consequences that result. You should consider whether you understand how spread bets, CFDs, futures, foreign exchange work, and whether you can afford to take the high risk of losing your money. Trading is risky. Okay, that's that. I did an options webinar a couple of weeks ago now. I'm thinking about doing my next medium-term options trade now with this volatility picking up a lot. But I've traded options off and on for about 20 years, 15, 20 years. So if you'd like to find out more about options, you can access the options webinar. You just need to be part of the WhatsApp group. So if you join the WhatsApp group, it's only a month-by-month subscription, 50 quid a month. I'll send you the link to that webinar. I think it's about a 90-minute webinar, that was. So more about how I trade options, why options aren't particularly good for directional trading, but other option strategies. So let's take a look at what's going on next week. There's a lot. EU, so European GDP on Tuesday. How well or how badly is the European economy doing? Then Wednesday we've got European CPI, inflation on Wednesday. Inflation still very much a hot topic. The big one for the week, I think, is the US interest rate decision on Wednesday evening, my time. So a few hours after US markets have been trading. And as usual with that, it's not so much the decision, it's the press conference and the thoughts from the central bank as to how they feel about the economy and where interest rates may go overall, all of that stuff. So that's Wednesday. Then Thursday, we've got the UK interest rate decision. And then on Friday, we've got non-farm payrolls, US unemployment numbers. So it's a very busy week next week in terms of announcements. Be interesting to see how markets react. Let's see what it all looks like. So I'll be here again next Friday to do the live stream after the payrolls, and we'll see what it looks like then. Okay, I run a WhatsApp group. I do a daily update. I do 2 updates. I do a morning update and an afternoon update. Markets I'm watching, trades I'm running, any questions, people can fire it in throughout the day. I think at the moment there's about 50 in the WhatsApp group, maybe slightly less than that, but people do seem to stick with it, so hopefully everyone finds it useful. If you'd like to try it for a month, you can sign up. Go to my website, which is davidjonestrading.co.uk. If you use the code YouTube, you can have a month's access with 20% off. So there's their website. Go to subscribe up here in the menu, blah, blah, blah. Click on that and you can subscribe to the WhatsApp group. And there's also details about the courses that I run, the performance. I've done a fair bit of open trading over the years. So you can see a breakdown of trades and all of that sort of stuff that I do actually know what I'm talking about. All right, so that's on the website. And finally, I send out a newsletter. I send out a newsletter every week when I remember. It goes out over the weekend, free of charge. If you're not on the list, if you go to the email box on the first page of the website, you can put your address in there and sign up to the email. Last week's was interesting. I thought it was interesting. I talked about how to spot if we're in a bear market. So yeah, if you sign up to the email, I think you can access all the old emails as well, all the old newsletters as well, and that's free. Okay, and that's what the WhatsApp update looks like. So there we go. Okay, so it's all there. Go to the website to find out more, and all the links are in the description down below, I think. Right, let's get into it. Interesting times. S&P 500, so the broader US stock market index. If we wind our little way back to Tuesday the 16th of July, a week last Tuesday, all-time highs on the S&P. Trend is up, blah, blah, blah. Everything looks fine. And then since then, we have had, a sizable sell-off. Let me just get rid of some of these things for now. A sizable sell-off. The market has dropped from 56.80 down to 53.93. So what's that? About a 300-point drop. 6% or so in the S&P in a week and a half. So it's a sizable drop. If you go back here to April, the market was 52.84, dropped to 49. So that was a 360 point drop. So, sort of similar size to that. And some quite sharp falls during the day. But I think it's interesting where it is now. We're on the trend line. So this is the trend line going back to October last year. So if it's going to bounce from anywhere, then here we are. So for me, from a more medium-term point of view, if I was a buyer, I could do with it going a bit lower, to be honest, for a more medium-term trade. But we've got a lot of support coming off those late May lows, 51.90, which is, 250 points below where we are now. So for me, I'm still expecting a bounce. But perhaps markets have been a little bit spooked by the size of the sell-off, plus we have that interest rate decision next week. So it could be some nervous times for markets. But overall, despite the sell-off, for me, the trend is still up. So I am still bullish for now. I'm not quite selling the house and digging my zombie apocalypse shelter to save myself from the coming economic meltdown. I think it's just a correction for now, but let's see. What was interesting yesterday, I talked about it in the WhatsApp group. I was short earlier in the week, the S&P, from somewhere, too early. Didn't get stopped out. Market sells off. I came out of it yesterday. It rallied yesterday. I went short again yesterday in here, and then came out overnight. But I thought what was interesting yesterday, and perhaps it gives, for those of us who are looking for the bounce, something to watch today. If you look at yesterday's S&P, this is the 10-minute chart. At between 10 past and 20 past 3 my time yesterday, so in the first 50 minutes of trade, the S&P hit 53.92. That was the low yesterday. The market ramps all its way up over the next few hours, rallies about 100 points, runs out of steam again, sells off into the close, but holds above the previous session low, or the low from earlier in the session. So for me, I think it makes for an interesting one this afternoon or today in US markets. If we see this market sell off a bit further from where it is now, does that low from yesterday hold? Let's call it 53.90. Does that low hold? And I think if that low gets broken, then the risk is we're going to lurch a little bit lower again. So it's perhaps a trading idea for me later on today. I don't really want to be a buyer from a day trading point of view because the trend is down. I'd rather sell rallies, But I think it's interesting if it does sell off towards 53.90. Do we see it hold from yesterday? Interesting to see what happens. But it's an interesting week and a half for US stocks. Let's see. Let's see what next week looks like. Not the S&P, Nasdaq. Same on the Nasdaq. We've got this trend on the Nasdaq going back to early 2023. So we're more than 18 months into that. The big Nasdaq level is some way away, 10% or so away from where we are now. It's 16,970, something like that. We've got other support on the dailies coming in around 18,000 or thereabouts. So again, there is a lot of support for this market. It was only the week before last, a couple of weeks ago, that we saw all-time highs. So I'm still a buyer of the dip when the dip stops dipping. So interesting to see what happens. Pretty volatile. A couple of weeks. Let's see. For the fans of these squiggles, 10-day RSI, the market is oversold on the 10-day RSI. So last time it was oversold was back here in April, and that did turn out to be an important low, and the market ramped higher. So yeah, interesting to see what happens with these markets. That's that. The Dow, even the Dow, has become under pressure. It's having a good day so far, the Dow, though. But the Dow all-time highs just a week yesterday on the Dow, on the 18th. Again, it's sold off. Interesting to see. Interesting to watch now what happens with the Dow. If you really wanted to go short the Dow, there's yesterday's high, 40,460. And then the highs from earlier in the week, Tuesday's high, 40,554. So again, if I was going short, I want to go short, this is a good area to go short the Dow with stops above those levels. Let's see how it all works out this afternoon. But plenty of things to watch, both short and medium term, for these US stock markets. The Russell, the smaller cap, it shows actually, it's quite interesting this, you can see the difference. The Nasdaq has obviously taken a bit of a beating. The Dow, not so much. The Russell, the smaller cap, pretty sideways. So, it's very much, this sell-off has been very much concentrated in the more goal-getting stocks, shall we say. What is it? The Magnificent Seven stocks. Clearly, the likes of Nvidia, Tesla, Apple, Amazon, and some others have more impact on the indices than other stocks because of their size. And so weakness and nerves in that part of the market has had a much bigger ripple effect on indices. But I thought it was interesting that Russell, did break out to its best levels since Jan 22. So 2.5 year highs on the Russell, and hasn't slid. So yeah, let's see how it all works out. So that's that. FTSE, FTSE. I don't like the FTSE. I mean, it's just a sideways market since the end of May. Okay, the trend is absolutely up. The FTSE, bang, bang, bang. So, I'd be a buyer of the dip, but look at it on the hourlies. It broke down yesterday and it comes zooming back today. It's not my most favourite market, the FTSE, to be honest. But overall, that trend is still up, so that's that. What I think is interesting for next week is the Nikkei. So the Japanese index, we had all-time highs in the Nikkei just a week yesterday, or is it 2 weeks yesterday? 2 weeks yesterday. All-time highs up at just shy of 42,500. And then yesterday, it traded as low as 37,300. So lost, was that 5,000 points from high to low? So more than 10%. In the space of a couple of weeks. I think that's an interesting market for next week. I would buy the dip next week. So I wonder if there is the trade there for me, assuming I believe the trend is still up, bang, bang, bang. The lows are in place here from April at 36,700 or thereabouts. Interesting to see how it trades on Monday, but I would be a buyer with a stop at least the other side of these April lows. So, it's interesting that we've broken out, we've pulled back. Does it hold back in the old range? And do we have another go at pushing up at 42,000? So I think that's an interesting market, the old Nikkei. DAX, German DAX, it's been volatile. I mean, we do have this recovery on the short-term charts on the DAX going from the middle of June, and it got knocked back yesterday to 18,100. This has been a good floor for the market, and we've seen it rally a couple of hundred points. So it's been a bit messy overall, but overall the trend is still up on the DAX, although on the daily it doesn't look quite as exciting. The French market, obviously the Olympics start today, or the opening ceremony is later today. I traded this a bit the last few weeks because we had this floor at 74.60 for the French index, the CAC. And it was a good floor, you know, buying into the weakness, stops the other side, blah, blah, blah. Worked all right. And then yesterday, bang, it's gone sailing through that low. So if you thought this was a valid breakout, then the strategy would be to sell this bounce. If I was selling this bounce, I'd have a stop at least the other side of whatever that high is, Wednesday's high. But I think it's interesting, you know, it came, these are the lows for the year in the French index from Jan at 72.80. So it came within 50 or 60 points of new lows for the year yesterday, the French index. But of course you could also say, well, the big trend is up. So from a more medium term point of view, is it a buy the dip? So I think it's a good illustration that depending on what time frame you're looking at, you can always come up for an argument for being a buyer or a seller. For now, I do wonder if it will be under a little bit of pressure. So from a short-term trading point of view, I'd rather be a seller. But interesting again to see how that all works itself out over the next week or so. So that's that. That's stock market indices. Dollar index, bit of a boring week really for the dollar index, considering all the shenanigans going on everywhere else. So this is Monday. You can see just sideways, has a little break up, has a little breakdown, does nothing. So it's trading pretty much where it was when we did the live stream last week. You know, so not too much for me to take out of that for the dollar index. Nothing really exciting in that market for me. And of course, if the dollar index is a bit boring, then everything else is a little bit boring as well. Pound against the dollar has sold off after hitting its best levels since July 23, 12-month highs. Maybe there's a trade in there next week. Let's get rid of these lines because they're a bit irrelevant. Is there a trade in there if we thought the trend was still up for the pound against the dollar? We've got that UK interest rate decision next week as well. Trend looks something like that. Bang, bang, bang. Bish, bash, bosh. Let's see. But not a lot there for me at the moment. Euro dollar. Again, a little bit not very exciting. But not a very exciting year, really, for the euro. What is interesting, I think, again, maybe one for next week, is dollar yen. So the dollar against the Japanese yen. We had this big move, or this trend for most of this year. You know, ended last year at 142, hit 162 in July, so a 2,000 point move, and it has tanked since then. But I think what's interesting, I've drawn this on over the last few weeks or so, and we've got all these levels of support. From the ultimate support for me was 151.85. That was the low from the beginning of May, and it held yesterday. So that's another one. If I had to do anything with that, I'd be a buyer next week on that with a stop. You know, taking the view, okay, the trend is clearly up for dollar, Japanese yen. Has the market overreacted? If I think it has, then I'd expect this old low to continue to hold. You know, a more conservative stop would be 150 or thereabouts. But even, you know, if I'm a buyer, where is it now? It's, what is it, 153.87 now with a stop at 150. So I've got nearly a 400 point stop. But if it does go back to where it was early in July, there's like 900 points upside on that trade from where it is now. 800 points upside. So it's still potentially a 2-to-1 trade, even if it just manages to get back to the old highs. Let's see, I think that's interesting. Dollar yen at the moment is an interesting market to watch. So that's that. Gold, funny, you know, I think perhaps some odd moves in gold, considering the dollar has been doing nothing. You know, we've seen the price of gold slide quite heavily the last week and a half, from all-time highs at 24.83 down to 23.50. So what's that, $130 slide? I wondered if that level would hold up, but it didn't. And we've got these old lows from back here, around about 23.50 on gold. So that again is one I think for me to watch next week. If I was a buyer, I'd have stops below that level there. I wouldn't be in a rush to buy it today because it made a new low yesterday. So let's see what happens with that one. Silver has been under pressure. I don't really like silver, but that's where we are on silver. We do have this old support coming in ahead of $26. So that's quite an interesting one to watch for next week. Natural gas. I did the video on natural gas earlier in the week and I went short in the video and that has played out okay. The big trend in natural gas, the most recent trend, is down off those highs in June. I wonder if this 198 to 2 ends up being something of a floor for natural gas. So if we were looking for the bounce, that's perhaps an interesting level to watch. But at the moment, it is still weak. So that's another, an interesting one for next week to see what happens. But you can see the trends just on the hourly charts. You know how that's panned out. Oil, again, just a bit sideways overall this year. Big swings, but no real consistent direction really, particularly after April. So I don't know. Based on the hourlies yesterday, I would be short because we've had this downtrend now since the beginning of July, the 5th of July. So I'd sell the rallies with stops above 80 or something. Let's see what happens next week. So again, not the most interesting market for me at the moment. The price of oil. Copper, copper's been really hit. Copper made an all-time high in May, up at 515 or thereabouts, and it's dropped almost 20% since those highs in May. I thought perhaps we have a bit of a pause here. That was not the case, and here we are in copper. So I suppose, what would you do if I was looking for the bottom? At the moment, I'd have stops the other side of 390, but there's been a particularly vicious sell-off, I think, in the price of copper. Bitcoin, bit boring overall. Bitcoin trend is still up since December 22, the latest bit of a trend. We had a bit of a false break through 56.5. Is it going to get nervous again ahead of 72, 74 next week? Let's see. So not a lot doing for me there in Bitcoin. And I think that's it. Have we covered everything there? I think we have covered everything, haven't we? So for me, going into next week, what to watch? It's a big week for US announcements. So we've got interest rates and we've got payrolls. So for me, US stock markets and the dollar. The dollar has not done very much, the dollar index, but dollar yen is definitely interesting because we're back into this old support zone. US stocks are interesting because we've come back to the trend line. We've had a big sell-off over the last week and a half. Let's see if these US stock markets stage some sort of recovery. And in Asia, the Nikkei, because it's pulled all the way back to those lows from April. So I think that's really interesting to see what happens there. Okay, so that's it. That's the stuff I'll be watching next week. To have a look at the stuff you want watching, let's have a look at the questions and go through some of that. Don't forget to sign up for the newsletter. Go to the website, davidjonestrading.co.uk, and you can try out the YouTube thing. Not the YouTube thing, this is YouTube. The WhatsApp subscription. If you use the code YouTube, you get 20% off a month. My next door neighbour's just gone out to the garden with a squeaky toy for the dog, so you might be hearing that. Okay, let's have a look at the stuff you want to have a look at. So if we go to, what's first of all? VanEck DAGB. What is that? Is it some sort of ETF? VanEck DA. I think you're going to have to give me a little bit of help with that. DAGB. Is it that? Oh, Crypto and Blockchain Innovators thingy ETF. All right, let's have a look at that. You don't hear much about the blockchain these days, do you? It's all AI now. The trend is up, isn't it, in this ETF? What's it done? So from 2023, it was 152. This is London listed, so I'm going to guess that's pounds, to nearly £7. That's done really well. So for me, the trend is up. So if the trend is up, I've got to be a buyer of the dip, obviously, because the trend is up. It just needs. I just rather have a bigger dip to buy. You know, if I was a buyer today, it did break out, didn't it? It's interesting, this one. I've never heard this before. If I was a buyer today at, where is it trading now? About 694. I would probably want my stop at least below 540. It's a wide stop, but clearly, you know, it's a pretty volatile ETF. You know, it's from low to high this year. It's doubled, so it's a big old range. So yeah, I'd buy it. The only question for me is, would I buy it now, or would I wait for the dip? So, but interesting one. Nice trend, that. Interesting chart, interesting ETF. Do you think CFDs are a good instrument for swing trading compared to futures, options, and other instruments? Well, I think you've got to compare. You can't really compare CFDs to options, because an options contract has a time element involved. So time decay plays its part on options. You can find out more about that by watching my options webinar. CFDs are an open-ended instrument. You know, so, okay, futures have an expiry, but it's different to options because there's no time element, or not as much of a time element built in. I think they're perfectly fine. You know, I use CFDs and spread betting here in the UK, which is basically a tax-free CFD. All the trading I do is CFDs / spread betting, apart from options. Yeah, so for me, for the directional stuff, yeah, CFDs are perfectly, in my opinion, the best instrument for swing trading, CFDs or spread betting. And if you want to find out who I trade with, I think there should be a link in the description down below. But if I put, actually I can type it. Can I type it in here? Will it work? I'll probably type it wrong. If you go there, that's, I think, who I trade CFDs, spread betting, or whatever it is, with. But yeah, it's fine because, you know, you obviously you pay a finance charge overnight because you're using leverage, you know, so they're not ideal if you're planning on holding something for, you know, 6 months or whatever. But for short-term trading, yes. The only problem, the problem trading options, short-term trading. So if I bought, so for example, let's use the S&P as an example, right? Let's say I thought the S&P was going to go up from here. So I'm going to buy, here we go, if I drag this across. So if I bring up my S&P ticket, which is there you go. 54, there's the market. 54.46, 0.4, tight spread. And that's it. And that moves. So that's the CFD / spread bet. That moves as the market moves. If I traded an option, I'd have to buy the 54.40 call option, for example, on the S&P. That would have a price, but there is a time element built into that. If the S&P goes sideways all day, my option will lose money because it's running out of time. If the S&P goes sideways, my CFD doesn't lose money because there's no time element built into the price. So yeah, they absolutely both have their place, but for directional trading, for me, CFDs, spread bets, all the way. So there you go. Taiwan Semiconductor, TSM. We've looked at this before, haven't we? Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. So again, for me, I mean, it's had a big old sell-off. It was 193. It's traded down to, what, 153. So it's lost 20% off those highs from earlier in July. I would be a buyer, but not yet. I would just want to make sure that we see the dip stop dipping. So I think it's an interesting one for next week. If we saw markets calm down a bit, I'd tempt to be a buyer. The closest I'd have my stop would be the other side of 147. But, you know, at the moment, I'd have no urgency to do it because let's just see, you know, where we were yesterday. It moved to a new low for the down move yesterday. So I'd happily be a bit more patient on that. But that's an interesting one to watch. The trend is still up. Let's see. Let's see what happens. And Qualcomm. I think they were on my list, actually, to buy. I haven't bought them. But I'm going to guess it's an uptrend and they've come off a lot. Yeah. That's interesting, that, isn't it? So it broke out. Let's get rid of that thing there. So it broke out to fresh highs in May. What's it come off? It's come off a chunk again, hasn't it? From 230 to 173 yesterday. So almost 30%, 25% drop. And the bet here, you know, similar to that Taiwan Semiconductor thing, is is whether you believe the trend is still up, whether you believe, okay, this is just a correction in the trend and we're going to go up again, or actually is the market deciding, you know, these high-tech stocks, they've all gone a bit too far this year. So that's the bet. And of course we don't know until after the fact. So I'd still be a buyer when things calm down. And I'd be like 155 stop on that. So interesting to see how they all do next week, I think. But yeah, I would like to be a buyer, but I don't want to catch a falling knife. I want to wait until these things stop falling. What else we got? Solana. What's Solana? Is that crypto? Crypto gypto? It's a bit boring, isn't it? It's a bit like what's it? Bitcoin, isn't it? Trend is absolutely up, but you know we've got the highs from March and the lows from whenever it is. It's just stuck in the middle. It's not even in the middle, is it? It's near the top. So if it was me and I was holding them, and I'd think, oh, is it going to run out of steam again? Around 200, 210? Or is it going to go breaking through? So for me, if I'm not in them and I'm not in them, I'd do nothing. If I held them, I'd have a trading stop on it. But yeah, not a lot there for me. Aussie dollar, US dollar. Where is that? Why haven't I got that on my list? All right, let's have a look. Aussie dollar, US dollar. Oh, look at that. That's interesting. I mean, big downtrend going back to 2021. Going back even further. Look at that. 2011. So at least 13 years of a sliding Australian dollar. And yeah, well, the trade to do would have been to go short at the beginning of July. So yeah, I'd rather sell the rally than buy the dip. It's interesting though, isn't it? Does not like sort of 0.69 up there. So for me, I wouldn't do anything at the moment. The trend is down. I'd rather sell a rally. Aussie yen. Aussie yen. Oh, wow. Other way around. I'd buy that. That's another interesting. There's a lot that are interesting for next week, I think. And that's, so we've got this market's been moving higher for not quite 18 months. The Australian dollar against the Japanese yen. So again, the bet here is, do you think this is an overreaction? And I would go with yes, it is. And I'd be a buyer. And at the moment, the closest I'd have my stop is perhaps the other side of 98 or 97 and a half, something like that. But that's interesting, isn't it? I mean, it really raced away from that trend in April and it's come crashing back down again. Are you going back to weekly live streams? I do. I mean, yeah, I was away. I was in Australia for a few weeks in whenever it was, late May and June. So I didn't do much then. But if I'm around, and I'll be around all the way through the summer, so I will be back to doing weekly live streams and also doing the odd video during the week as well. Dollar yen, we did that. Turkish yen, is that TRY? Turkish yen, Japanese yen, not the yen, Turkish lira. TRY, that's not coming up for me. TRY, JPY. Oh, there we go. I don't think I've ever looked at that. Oh my God, look at that. You would want to be a seller, wouldn't you? Seller of the Turkish lira. So back in 10, 11 years ago, Turkish lira bought you 56 Japanese yen. Today it buys you 4.5 of them. Yeah, I wouldn't trade it, but you've got to be. I'd have to be a seller of rallies because the trend is down. Euro Aussie, lots of currencies today. Euro Aussie. Bit boring, isn't it? What would you do? I don't know. I'd probably sell it. If I had to do a trade today, I'd sell it. And I'd have a stop the other side of 168 is what I would do. But again, it's all a little bit too side. That's the last 12 months. And it's all, okay, there are some big swings in there, aren't there? But it's just a lot of sideways stuff going on, isn't there? So Canada against the Swiss franc. CAD chuff. CAD chuff. I would sell it, but I wouldn't sell it here. I'd rather sell a rally. We have had, you know, we had the low, the market had a big rally off the low, but didn't take out the previous highs, did it? So it's, for me, it's still weak. I'd rather sell a rally. Maybe in the short term, we'll get a little, you know, the lows for the year, it's moved back to the lows for the year, the Canadian dollar against the Swiss franc. Yeah, interesting for maybe a bounce, but I'd rather sell it if it gets back above 66 again. It looks like a sell to me. Are you still in the live cattle trade? No, I've long out of live cattle. I think, do you know what? When did I do it? I can't even remember. Last year, was it? It was last year. It was a great trend last year, live cattle. It's interesting now, isn't it? I mean, what would you do now? Is there a cup and handle? I don't know. I'm never very good at spotting patterns. I mean, it has, I would go short live cattle. There we go. Let's get right to the point. I would just go short because it's interesting, isn't it? That some of these agricultural ones are interesting at the moment. Maybe we'll have a quick look at some. But this was the old high from September 23. Sells off, breaks out, but doesn't. Sells off, breaks, but doesn't. And here we are again. So live cattle cannot get through 190, whatever that is. 190 a pound, who knows? But that's the level, isn't it? So for me, if I had to do a trade on live cattle, I'd go short. It's an interesting one, that, actually. I would live cattle. What else was interesting? What else? Soybeans. I thought soybeans were going to bounce because we had this little recovery going on. So I would have been a buyer. I didn't do it in the end, but they've broken down. Then you have these other markets that had been crazy, like cocoa. You know, cocoa had a crazy run the first 4 months of this year and has calmed down a bit. Orange juice was a great market last year. Great trend. It is still strong, but it's perhaps calmed down a bit. Sugar, it's been a good market for me in the past. Some great trends in there. But again, it's been a very different 2024. So I think obviously the falling price of these agricultural commodities, you know, will have fed through to inflation and all of that. BTI, what is BTI? BTI, doesn't know. British American Tobacco. Oh, I've got these in my pension. Let's look at the UK listed ones. And it's because it had a good run. It's been rubbish, but I bought them for the dividend. I'm wondering if there's going to be a turnaround. And maybe we're seeing the first signs of a turnaround. I don't know. I think I'd rather see them through these old highs, first of all, see what happens. If we look at the US listing, what are the highs to watch? I mean, yeah, sort of, yes. It's interesting to see what I would rather see. So this is the US listing of British American Tobacco. A sell-off and a hold and then a buy the dip. But perhaps we're seeing it turning around. I don't know. Short Heli. What's Heli? Hele. Helen of Troy Limited. Is that an actual company? What do they do? Consumer durables. I mean, that looks horrible, doesn't it? That is a horrible chart. Yeah, but the problem I'd have with going short with all these, you know, runaway markets like this, where'd you put your stop? That is where the closest I put my stop. That is a massive gap, isn't it? So they closed at about 89 and they opened at 61. Ouch. That is painful, isn't it? So yeah, but that is a definite downtrend, isn't it? And what's W? Wayfair. I mean, you could argue Wayfair is trying to recover, isn't it? It's going well off those highs, isn't it? But you could argue that perhaps it's trying for a recovery. It's been a bit boring again, hasn't it, this year, though? So, but you could argue that even though it's been a bit sideways this year, you know, it hit the bottom of the range again yesterday at $47. So, you know, one trade could be to be a buyer with a stop below 47 and see what happens. See if we get a bounce back up to the 60s again from here. See what it looks like. What's Tesla doing? I was thinking about going short Tesla last week, but I bottled it because it was the earnings. And I thought, you know, it could go either way, really. It would have worked out all right in the end. But with Tesla, you know, for me, the trend is still down since November 21. So we're 2.5 years plus into that. It's had a good run this year off these lows in April, but we've still got all all these old highs, 268 to 300. So yeah, I would definitely be a seller of strength in the old Tesla. And that's it, isn't it? If there's no more questions, we're done. So what to watch? Well, for me, US stocks is still obviously a big focus because of everything that's gone on over the last week and a half. For today, I think this 53.90, the lows from yesterday, is an interesting one. If it holds above there, then perhaps we've got a chance of some sort of recovery next week. So I think that's an interesting one to watch. The Nikkei, like I said, next week, I think is an interesting one. Then we've got all that US data coming out next week, the interest rates and the payrolls. So it could be a busy week. We'll see. But as ever, to find out more about the stuff I do, go to the website, davidjonestrading.co.uk. If you're not on the newsletter list, go on the newsletter list. I write that this weekend, send that out to everybody. If you'd like to try the the WhatsApp thing with the updates from me throughout the day, you can go and subscribe and use the code YouTube, and I'll put the link in. I'll send you the link to that options video. And if there are any questions, drop me an email. I should put my email on there, but my email is dj@davidjonestrading.co.uk. So any questions, I'm more than happy to try and answer them via email. Like I always say, I don't have all the answers, but I do have a lot of experience. I've been doing this a long time. Okay, that's it. Let's see where we are next week. Hopefully see you all then. In the meantime, good luck with your trading and have a good weekend. Okay.